All right, we are live. Any of you who do tune in, if you would say here or something in the chat, just that we all know you're there. It tells me how many viewers there are, and there are currently 2 or 3. I thought I'd start while people are jumping on by saying and sharing a few of the things that I've been doing lately. I would like to hear from you all about things that you have been doing during this very strange time. Caught us all by surprise. So this morning, got up early and ended up, we were going to run, but ended up riding my bike with friend Andrew Crow from the State Hospital Park. We rode bikes for about a half hour or so early this morning, and that was a good time. It was a little cool, but we wore gloves and stuff like that. Been around the office today talking with different staff of the church. News for probably most everyone is that the part of the church was struck by lightning last Thursday when we had that thunderstorm, which has knocked out a couple of computers, and it actually damaged our video system to run video out to the different TVs that are in the church building. So we've been working on that, trying to get the parts that we need. One of the copiers went out because of this lightning strike, and so what can you do? One more thing to happen right now. But I would like to hear from you all what you are doing. If you don't want to put it on the stream, that's okay. You can text it to me, what you're filling your days with. Yesterday, the boys and I watched Captain America Winter Soldier, so that was a pretty fun movie for the day. I've watched something like 4 Marvel movies in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Iron Man 2, Avengers, Age of Ultron, then Guardians of the Galaxy. We were watching Lonesome Dove Returns. So we watched the whole Lonesome Dove, the very sad Lonesome Dove last week, and so we're watching the pretty equally sad sequel, but that's just a part of how Lonesome Dove is, I guess. So now that we are at the time we planned to get together here, what I want to do is something a little different. We've been doing a series on Wednesdays called Bridge to Life, and I wanted to put that on pause. This is a new kind of period that we're in. It feels unique, and so I wanted us to have kind of a new start, see how long this lasts. I've talked to a few people about how long they think this might go, and obviously no one knows exactly, but I was thinking about what we could do together, and I have come to Proverbs. I propose that those of us who are thinking about crossover, those of us who are tied in, parents and students, that we read Proverbs over the next 31 days. We kind of read a chapter of the day, that we think about wisdom. The book is designed to give us wisdom to make it in life, to handle changing circumstances in our lives. And so I thought that would be a great thing that we could be doing together. We'd be reading the same thing every day. It would tie us together that way. I hope and pray that we'll be in different circumstances in 31 days than we are right now, but it certainly looks like March is going to be about like this. That's the first call that we've seen from the president and some other areas, just that we're going to try to slow March down as much as possible as far as people being out. That is the goal of this 15-day kind of moratorium we've seen on people going out, on, for instance, restaurants being open, and some of these things. The Y closed yesterday. A lot of places have been closing, as you all know, and so I anticipate, I hope and pray that we'll be in a different situation in 31 days. My proposal is just that we would read a chapter of Proverbs every day. I'm going to make it really easy. I'm going to read the whole chapter here in just a moment, and so that will be done. I will be putting out on different social media about kind of thoughts on Proverbs as we're reading. I encourage you, if you want to do the same. And that will enable us to kind of keep connecting, which is important in this time. And the longer time goes on, the more we'll just have to work to connect in all the ways that we can. And so tonight I want to read this first chapter of Proverbs. I want us to think about wisdom, what wisdom is, what we are told about wisdom in this chapter. I want to look at 3 areas that we need wisdom. So we need to learn about God. We need to learn about kind of general wisdom about the world, how to navigate that. But then a third category is wisdom about ourselves. This is an area that surprisingly, in your Christian life, you take kind of multiple turns, and it seems at a certain point you go like, well, I'm just not even going to concern myself with myself at all. That you realize how self-centered you are in a lot of ways. But I took an odd turn back in a certain way at some point, and that is that self-knowledge is really important. 2 things led me there. There is a quote I heard in a podcast where someone was quoting Saint Augustine of Hippo, and he said, I want to know 2 things, yourself, Lord, and myself. And he struggled. He didn't understand himself, and he couldn't predict his own behavior. And he asked God in this prayer, in Augustine's soliloquies, he said, I want to know yourself and myself. And actually, that's at the beginning as well. John Calvin says the same thing in the Institutes of the Christian Religion. He says that we need to have wisdom, especially about 2 areas, God and ourselves. And if you think about it, that makes sense, because we need to know ourselves. We need to understand ourselves. Self-understanding is very hard to attain, because you're never not you. It's deep, right? You're never not you, and you walk around being you from the moment you wake up and get up until you are going to sleep every night. Can't imagine what it would be like in a lot of ways to be someone else. And so self-knowledge is really important, and Proverbs is a doorway to self-knowledge as well. And so let's look for those 3 areas of knowledge about God, general wisdom and knowledge about the world, and then wisdom about ourselves. Wisdom is applied knowledge. Wisdom is the ability to make it, to get along in life, to have the resources and to marshal the resources to accomplish what you need to accomplish in life. And so let's look deeper into what wisdom is. Here in Proverbs 1. I'll be reading out of the New Living Translation. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for attaining wisdom and discipline, for understanding words of insight, for acquiring a disciplined and prudent life, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. For understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They will be a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, do not give in to them. If they say, come along with us, let's lie in wait for someone's blood. Let's waylay some harmless soul. Let's swallow them alive like the grave, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We will get all sorts of valuable things, and fill our houses with plunder. Throw in your lot with us, and we will share a common purse. My son, do not go along with them. Do not set foot on their paths, for their feet rush into sin, and they are swift to shed blood. How useless to spread a net in full view of all the birds. These men lie in wait for their own blood. They waylay only themselves. Such is the end of all who go after ill-gotten gain. It takes away the lives of those who get it. Wisdom calls aloud in the street. She raises her voice in the public squares. At the head of the noisy street, she cries out. In the gateways of the city, she makes her speech. How long will you simple ones love your simple ways? How long will mockers delight in mockery and fools hate knowledge? If you'd responded to my rebuke, I would have poured out my heart to you and made my thoughts known to you. But since you rejected me when I called, and no one gave heed when I stretched out my hand, since you ignored all my advice and would not accept my rebuke, I in turn will laugh at your disaster. I will mock when calamity overtakes you like a storm, when disaster sweeps over you like a whirlwind, when distress and trouble overwhelm you. Then they will call to me, but I will not answer. They will look for me, but will not find me. Since they hated knowledge and did not choose to fear the Lord, since they would not accept my advice and spurned my rebuke, they will eat the fruit of their ways and be filled with the fruit of their schemes. For the waywardness of the simple will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. But whoever listens to me will live in safety and be at ease without fear of harm. One area I intend to really be thinking about as we go through this book is fear and all the forms of fear. So low-level fear we call apprehension or anxiety as it rises. As fear becomes very strong and overwhelming, we call it terror or dread. And we're acquainted with fear all of our lives. I remember when I was a kid, I had the strangest fear. I would go to sleep. I can remember distinctly my mom and I, when we lived at 14 North McKinley in Harrisburg, Illinois, I would go to sleep in that bed every night. And I can remember I would pull my covers, and I would never want to let my arms hang off of the bed or my legs. And here's why. I mean, I can remember every night thinking this thought, that this is why I should not do that, why I should keep my arms and legs in the bed. Because I was pretty convinced that at night, while I was sleeping, little mice with bows and arrows would come out, and if I had any of my arms or legs off the bed, that somehow they might be able to shoot my arms and legs with the bows and arrows that they had. And I there was some thought at some point that maybe their little bows and arrows had ropes, and then maybe they could pull me off the bed. And here's the thing about this. I have no idea why I thought this. If I saw anything from a movie that might have kind of led me there. But that was a fear that I had. And I had it for quite a while. I can't remember, dispelling it or thinking about when a time when I kind of decided that was ridiculous. It just seemed to be something that I at some point stopped thinking about. But our fears are not rational. Fears are not things that you can be talked out of. And it's really been funny. Anytime I've ever talked to someone else about a fear that they have that I don't, and I've seen other people try to say to people that are afraid of snakes that, well, you just shouldn't be afraid of snakes. Wow, can we not talk each other out of fears, and we cannot talk ourselves out of our fears. But that it's so strange that we can look at other people and think that we could talk them out of their fears. Because there is a lot, even in this first section, about fear. Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. It says in the New American Standard, this one said wisdom and discipline. And so these words are all tied together. You grow up with so many different fears. And I do think that the fear of God is a basic fear that we kind of live with. But the beginning of wisdom, the beginning of understanding, it says here, is the fear of the Lord. So here's something I was thinking about. Everybody on earth pretty much has to fall into a category of 4 answers to this question. So the question is, who holds your destiny? There are a lot of people in response to this question would say, yourself, or I do. If you come to an understanding of your world, you start thinking about how you don't have as much power as some other people. A second response might be that powerful people are controlling your destiny to some degree. Some people might say that no one is controlling your destiny. And then the fourth response is God, that God controls your destiny. Well, based upon whatever you think about the answer to that question, who holds your destiny, is going to put you in a certain position for life, so that if you believe you control your own destiny and you're in a situation like we're in now where we can't control very much, you couldn't guarantee that you could go out to a store and find toilet paper right now. It kind of knocks you down from thinking you control your own destiny. If you hold that powerful people control your destiny, you're going to be probably angry, depending on how your life turns out. If you're a person who gets a lot of help, then maybe you won't be angry. But I anticipate if your belief is that powerful people control your destiny, it will lead you to some degree of frustration. Now, some people would say that, I think there's just a universe, and that the universe sort of controls my destiny. So this kind of vague idea. I would put that under no one, just from the standpoint of there's despair lurking behind no one controls my destiny. Well, then anything that happens to you is chaos. You end up in a situation where if something bad goes wrong for you, there's nothing to do but to weep and be sad about it. And if something's going right for you, then, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. It's just kind of Epicureanism. Enjoy what you've got, and then when it's gone, that's it. But to all this, the Bible says here in Proverbs 1:7 that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, that God holds our destiny, that whatever comes, that all good things flow from his hand, that we are in a broken world, that one of the realities that we have to deal with is that if something bad does happen to us, that God could have stopped it, but that he didn't. But we still hope in the Lord. He is our hope. So a high respect for God is the call that we have here. But even beyond that, more than just respect, that he has the highest allegiance in our life, that we know we owe everything to him. So if we have this fear of the Lord, then We'll be prepared to receive correction and discipline in other areas of our life. And if we don't have it, we won't even change our ways when we fail, because it says there that fools despise wisdom and discipline and instruction. So we have all these checkpoints in our life when we do have failures, and we have opportunities to turn to God. And there are all those checks in our life. What is a high respect for God? If we have a high respect, then one, simple things that we've heard all along. We don't take his name in vain. We don't even say things like, somebody says something that we don't like, say, oh God, or something like this, that we reserve calling for him for when we mean to call for him, which is a wise spiritual practice called the practice of the presence, knowing that he's there, respecting that he is there. The practice of his presence is the easiest way to prayer. God is there. Talk to him. And then finally, how do we heed warnings? So it says that there will be warnings. We should be pushing ourselves and trying things in our life. Life is risk. But we should be walking somewhere between being brash and being reckless, and then being cowardly. So this is called the golden mean, is when we understand that the goal is not to be just brash and brazen and just without any sort of self-control, but then we're also not cowardly. So that's where courage is. Courage is understanding that you could just go wild and be angry and have a rage. But then courage is also understanding that you could just be a coward and run from all the problems. And so understanding both of those things is really important in how to heed warnings. Once you know what risks are worth taking, that's where wisdom comes in, to understand what risks are worth taking, which, by the way, is really important right now. We have to take risks still. We have to see people. We are at a limit of being in groups of 10, but look, we can still see people under groups of 10, so we should. Wisdom gives us the ability to know what risks are worth taking, but then courage enables us to go ahead and take those risks. And so we have to have that. Now, before we get too far from talking about fears, I looked up today, what are the top 10 fears of people? I don't know what your fears are, but I thought it would be interesting to kind of gather a list. I got this from a website called learningmind.com, and these are top 10 fears as they list them. All right, so number 10 is a fear of getting old. And it says here that this fear is rare in young people who often just don't think about getting old. But when people turn 50, beginning to think about all that aging is going to bring, this fear begins to rise. Number 9 is the fear of being poisoned. I don't know if any of you have this fear. There are certain things that, I was surprised this is on the list, because it's like, well, that would be bad if somebody poisoned me. I don't know that I've ever kind of much thought about, is there somebody trying to poison me? This one, this is kind of like fear of being stabbed or something like that. It's like, well, yeah, that's a fearful thing, but I don't know that there's anybody out there trying to get me in that way. But anyway, fear of being poisoned, number 9. Fear of being a coward. This one, it says that this is more prevalent in men than in women, this fear. And it says that for people with a feeling of responsibility for others, this fear develops, that these people tend to have kind of managerial skills. And so that's kind of a neat fear, I think, in the sense that it would make you ready, to move, ready to do something in a tough situation. So number 8, fear of being a coward. Number 7, germophobia. Fear of bacteria or microorganisms of various kinds. And I'll just read you this one just because it's funny in our times. Surely, at least once in your life, you've seen or heard about people who wash their hands dozens of times a day. You ever heard of any of those people? Do house cleaning several times every day and cannot touch many innocuous objects only because they're afraid to catch some dangerous virus or bacteria. I can't imagine. I mean, isn't that something? So, that's one. Number 7, germophobia. Number 6, fear of going crazy, fear of mental illness. So this says this one occurs in people who are more of a spiritual nature. Think about religion, philosophy, and these sorts of things. So fear of mental illness is number 6. Number 5, fear of intimacy. So this is a fear, it says, occurs not only in 16-year-olds, but it says fear of intimacy, fear of opening about emotions is pretty common. That people may have had a bad experience of some kind. So number 5, fear of intimacy. Number 4, fear of, I like this one. So they put this is like a big umbrella term. Okay, you got fear of spiders, rats, cockroaches, snakes, airplanes, monsters, demons, mirrors, high heels. So this one is interesting because I like what they do here, picking out certain objects in our world and kind of combining them into one. So yeah, fear of all these kinds of things. My mom's really afraid of snakes. I have what I would call a healthy fear of snakes. I don't love snakes, but I don't, hate or just like pass out in the presence of snakes. So I think that, I have an aunt who's very afraid of worms. I mean, deathly afraid of worms, which is, I don't know, I kind of think it's a funny one. But she doesn't. So then the next one is social phobia. So this is like includes fear of public speaking. It says fear of people, what people might think of you, and these sorts of things. So it says that everybody's afraid to show their feelings and emotions in front of others to some degree. But for some people, this can become greater. And so this is very common fear. Fear of public speaking is I have heard before that it's number 1. I have no idea of their research methods. This list is mostly for fun. So if you're the kind of person who wants a scientific background, I don't have it, but I'm sure you can go find it if you want to. So number 2, fear of death. So fear of death, they have all kinds of categories about, heights or plane crashes and these sorts of things. But fear of death, obviously common. I think this is reasonable. Death is a scary thing as far as death will probably hurt. Again, I think pain is a normal thing to fear. If you don't fear pain at all, then you're tough, and I'm proud of you. And then 1 is fear of loneliness on this. And it talks about that everybody shares this fear. It mentions that people with autism share this fear, that even though a lot of people with autism are characterized by kind of isolation in some ways, that this fear is found in everyone, and that we need each other, that we are social, we need other people, and so that fear of loneliness is a common fear. I wanted to mention these because we all have fears. I think that it is the most helpful thing for us to admit to some people that we trust that we have fears, and then to be open with them about how we're dealing with our fears. The Bible does not encourage us to be just kind of like foolishly trusting and open to everyone, but we should find people that we can trust and open up about our fears and be consistent about that, not just one time. Now, I want to move here to what is, I think, probably the toughest section of Proverbs 1, and that is that whole part that you probably caught about how you better take the warnings because not only will it not go well for you, but let's just ask the direct question. Wow, it seems pretty hard that element where wisdom, here personified as a woman, calling out in the streets, says, if you do not listen to me when I'm calling to you, and you don't listen to my warnings, then when you get to the end of your problems, don't call to me then. I'll mock you then. So we're going to ask directly, well, how can this be? How can this be God's advice for us? So I want to read it again. Because I called and you refused. This is in verse 24. Because I called and you refused. I stretched out my hand and no one paid attention. And you neglected all my counsel. You did not want my reproof. I will also laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your dread comes. When your dread comes like a storm and your calamity comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you, then they will call on me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but they will not find me, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. So, what do we do about this fact? Well, first of all, listen carefully to that first part, where wisdom says, when you hear me calling, you turn to me and listen. Do what I say. I think that God has enough knowledge about us to know the very common thing that we do, which is, all right, I hear you. I know what I ought to do, and I'm going to do it, just not yet. I'll probably do it like later, maybe after dinner or tomorrow, during the next kind of season of my life, a different phase. And I hope you hear the advice in this is if you hear from God what to do, if you know the way of wisdom, take it. Take it. Do not delay. Do not wait. That is foolish. That is the way to destruction. There's a C.S. Lewis essay called God in the Dock. And he says this. He says, if you sense God is working in your life, you move on that. I mean, the book of Hebrews says, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as they did in the past. You can read the whole Old Testament and see the people hearing from God and going, well, why do we have to do that? Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. The point of God in the dock, that if God is there in the dock of your life, if thinking of God as like a boat calling you to get on, to move, don't hold out. God will not stay in the dock forever. Take the opportunities that you have. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. God has judgment on those who refuse instruction and correction and then find themselves in the consequences of their sins. In this way, God will not be used. He will not be manipulated. And so the call is, if you hear his voice, turn to him. He gives his word to prevent destruction and fear and panic. And he will not be found by those who seek to use him just to solve their problems and change their circumstances, and then to discard him. That is not wisdom. I mean, it's not wisdom to use God and then to discard him when it's convenient for you. That's just not wisdom. He's interested in changing hearts here in Proverbs, just as in the New Testament. And so there's one last verse that I want us to look at a little more closely, and that's Proverbs 1:33. But he who listens to me shall live securely and will be at ease from the dread of evil. He who listens to me shall live securely and will be at ease from the dread of evil. There are all kinds of evil in the world. There's wrong. There is moral wrong, so like stealing and murder and rape and all kinds of like evil done by agents, by other people. There is natural evil. The world is broken, so there are earthquakes, there are floods. Everything is broken. There are all kinds of evil, but listen again to the promise. He who listens to me shall live securely and will be at ease from the dread of evil. There is a way to bear evil, and that is listening to God. There is evil in our world, and that's a simple fact. But we can bear up under it with wisdom by walking with God. Even the legitimate fear of evil will be combated by receiving the instruction of the Lord. Evil is present. It causes stress and anxiety. But listen to him. In him there is peace. In him there is peace. So again, here is what I am proposing for the next 31 days. We have just read Proverbs 1 together. Tomorrow, I will read Proverbs 2. You'll probably see some things going out on different social media accounts that I have about things in Proverbs 2. Specifically, I know I'm watching for issues about fear and anxiety and all of those. That's just something I really want to focus on this time through Proverbs. I would encourage you to do the same. I look forward to this. I think this is something fun that we can do together, knowing that each other are reading this. Many of us have some open times in our day, and the Bible says to make the most of every opportunity. So I pray and I hope that we can make the most of this very strange opportunity that we have together. I've heard from some others in the church tonight that are connecting through various virtual ways. Make the most of your opportunities in whatever way that you can. I know in the next couple of days there will be information out about other things going on in our church and what we want to try to do in the meantime here. But take care of each other, stay in contact with each other, try things. We need each other, and every day we do, but I think this time reinforces that for us. So we're going to call it here. I'm so glad that we were able to do this together. I look forward over the next 31 days of reading Proverbs together. Spread the word that we are doing this. So we'll end here. Good to be with you all in this way. I pray and I look forward to the time we can be together again in the regular way. So have a good night, everybody.